evolution, the origin of higher elements, all somehow evolving from hydrogen. Stellar and planetary evolution is how did all the stars form by themselves. Organic evolution, the origin of life. Macroevolution is the changing from one kind to another. And then microevolution is what the only thing we see. Okay? So based on this, we're going to continue our study because the first 5 are, you have to believe it happened. You have to have the faith that somehow life began from non-living materials. That's a big leap of faith if you ask me. You've got to believe somehow that macroevolution, that somehow dogs, when they breed, they're going to produce something else besides dogs. You got to believe that somehow the origin of life, that everything happened from a big bang, even though it's not testable or you cannot reproduce it. All of those 5 are just theory. You have to believe in it. And the only thing we actually observe is the last one, is microevolution. We're going to talk a whole lot about that this coming week, next weekend, okay? Or next Wednesday night, excuse me. But just know that these first 5 are purely religious. They're non-scientific. You cannot prove them in any way. Although people have tried to prove them, you just really can't, okay? They have a hard time. So, first day that we were here, that we kicked off this seminar, we saw that God said, let there be light, and there was light. We saw how this world cannot possibly be millions of years old because there's so many indicators in this world that show us that we live in a young earth creation or created world. Day 2, we saw something that was just spectacular, and that was the firmament. The firmament that we have today is not like it was in the pre-flood era. The pre-flood world experienced this very awesome place. We talked a lot about that. But today we're actually going to talk about day 3, where it says, and God stretched out the land, or he brought forth the land and all the green veggies and all that stuff. So, when we think about the pre-flood world on day 2, this is what we have to look at concerning the biblical model, right? It was just a bunch of water. It separated the waters from the water, created the firmament. Okay, that firmament did a very special thing for us. It actually created, it blocked all the harmful UV rays. It gave us extra oxygen. We saw scientific facts for that. That water above the earth was suspended. Theoretically, the Meissner effect, kind of like a canopy of water. We also saw how that canopy of water had something very special for us because of it, we were able to grow vegetables that are just big and they're just so much better than what we have today. With a test that we've done with Dr. Kay Morey, if you remember him. We also saw last week about that there was gigantism in all the animal kingdom, okay? And that's pretty much how we ended up. No, we ended up actually talking about even human beings were made big, and there's the big conspiracy. And I showed you the news articles on how the Smithsonian Institute has literally destroyed hundreds of gigantic skeletons because it doesn't fit the evolution narrative. Okay? Now, next day, and it's found in Genesis chapter 1, verses 9 through 13, and it says, and God said, let the waters under the heavens be what, church? Gathered together into one place, and let the what? The dry land appear. We're going to talk about that today and how the land was formed. And it was so, and God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas. Remember, there's no oceans back then, all right? And the evening and then in the morning were what? The third day, a definite article. How many third days can there be? 1 third day, okay? There's not a bunch. Now, there's some other interesting texts in the Bible that I want to show you guys real quick. Like, for example, Psalms 136, verse 6. It says, To him that stretched out the earth above the waters. That's a cool verse right there, right? It gives you that notion that in the pre-flood world, there was a lot of water underneath and there was a lot of water, land on top. Now, how many of you guys have ever gone to Florida vacation? Or lived there? Okay, how about Cancun? Or the whole Yucatan Peninsula? Okay. For those that have been to those areas, you know that there's a lot of greenery everywhere, but underneath there's a ton of water. I mean, you have caves that stretch out for hundreds of miles and connect everywhere. And even in the Yucatan Peninsula, they're still discovering that it's all connected. There's some caves that they haven't found the end to them. Okay? So, goes right along with that. And it says in Psalms 24, verse 1, the earth is whose? Is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world, and they that dwell therein. For he hath founded it upon where? Upon the seas, and established it upon the what? On the floods. So this whole idea that the world was a bunch of water, and then God stretched out the earth on top of it, makes perfect sense according to the Bible. Okay? And it's what we have seen in the pre-flood world, and most of it was vegetation. We also talked because of the canopy of water, temperature was the same at the equator as it was in the North Pole. That would have been very convenient, wouldn't it? Right now, we don't have that, right? So in the past, we had the layer of water underneath. The earth was up on top. According to the Bible, God stretched it out. We're not sure how thick it was, but we know that God said it and it was there. Then there was the firmament, and then there was some ice or some water, some sort of water form on top. All came down whenever we had the great flood. And we also talked quickly out last week how we still have evidence of the flood, where the earth literally broke up and the fountains of the deep gushed the water forth, and therefore this is what we have earth today. Okay, and we also talked about that there's still a lot of water under the crust of the earth. And I believe a couple of years ago they have found one of the biggest water deposits, and you know where it's at? Africa. Down underneath, they have found so much water there that it's incredible. So we still have a bunch of hot fountains or vents in the bottom of the ocean spewing out hot water and whatnot. It's pretty cool. But now, that is the biblical version, okay? Now, I want you to catch this. This is what modern day science or evolution teaches in our biology classes, okay? For example, they say life came from rocks. And if you notice the chart, that's actually telling you how much oxygen and how it developed. Look at the very beginning right there. It says the rocks absorbed the oxygen, but there was no oxygen back then. They have it at 0, but somehow the rocks absorbed it. And through the different stages, the first life, I don't know how the first life produced oxygen, and I don't know how they actually can test this and call it scientifically, but somehow the oxygen increased until where we have today, okay? And so it makes no sense. They're claiming that somehow there was no oxygen, but the rocks actually absorbed it. How is that even possible? You got to ask the experts, because it doesn't make sense to me, right? And then they come up with this idea, and I'm sure everybody has heard of it, and it's called the Pangea theory. How many have heard it? Yeah, Pangea. Yeah, that's how life formed, one big landmass together. And they use this, and they say that this great supercontinent at one point started breaking apart in different sections and just started floating over the water, like if there's some sort of water lilies, I guess, gigantic water lilies, so they can spread out however they want. And so that's how we get the modern day continents that we have. And they even have stuff like this, that if you look at closely at South America and you look at Africa, they kind of fit perfectly well together and, and therefore it must have been connected at some point, right? So here's what they say. This is their evidence, the Pangea or the continental drift theory. It says that the shapes of the continents seem to fit. We're going to look at that in a little bit, right? The other theory they say is that, hey, we have found similar fossils around the whole world, right, on the different sides of the ocean. So that tells us that somehow they were all connected at the same time. And they say, yes, that happened. Similar fossils, one in South America, one in Africa. Therefore, at one point, they were close together. But similar fossils are actually found all over the world. Guess what else that can tell you? That there was a great flood all over the world. It doesn't mean that the land was connected. So that's what they say. And then they talk about the magnetic reversals at the mid-Atlantic ridge. We talked about that last week, where there is no magnetic reversals at the bottom of the ocean. It gets stronger and weaker, but you'll never go down there and find that it actually reverses. It's just stronger magnetic force, lower, stronger, lower, but it's not reverse. Here's what they don't tell you, okay? In order to make Pangea fit the narrative and call it millions of years old, they have to literally shrink Africa down about 35 to 40%. For those that have been to Africa, Africa is huge. I mean, South America is big too, but not compared to Africa. Africa is very big. What they don't tell you as well, and this should actually put this to rest, this theory, is that Mexico, Central America are gone. How can that be possible? What happened to Mexico, Panama, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, Belize, Nicaragua? What happened to them? Don't they know that they're the people that built everything? So it's impossible for this theory to work, right? Oh boy. They don't tell you that in order to make this Pangea fit better, Europe and South America have been rotated counterclockwise and Africa clockwise. They've been rotated so that it will fit. And get this, some people have a hard time with this, so let me explain this slowly. Did you know that if we were to empty out the oceans, there's land underneath? Some people have a hard time with that. We're not a bunch of lily pads floating around. No, there's ground everywhere, all right? Dirt, ocean floor, sand, it's there. It connects every single part of the thing, of the earth. And therefore, for it to move around like that, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. So, earth science, teaching our kids that somehow the earth was formed and there was this big bubbly stuff everywhere. And somehow the earth was hot and there was large pools of bubbling lava and somehow it cooled off and it rained. Where did the rain come from? I don't know. Rained for millions of years, and then somehow in that soup, man crawled out. Or not man, but lower life forms. There's a really good book here. I don't know if anybody has had the chance to see this book. Has anybody read this book? It's a really good, okay. He's Adventist. He's an Adventist scientist. Yes, he's an Adventist, Robert. He's an Adventist, and he actually did a lot of studies on granite. Granite is the foundation stone of which the earth is built on, granite, okay? And what he did was pretty interesting because he sliced granite down, and here's him studying it and looking down there and to the atoms that are found inside of it. And he found, I believe it's called plutonium. No, not plutonium. Yeah, I think it is plutonium. And what he found is this, that the atoms inside granite. You have a question? That's correct. That's him. Yes. So what he found out was in the granite, you have, if you, the PO half-life that is formed around the nucleus of the granite rock and the atoms is literally 0.164th of a second. That's the half-life of that. In other words, it could not have formed rapidly. It has to be formed instantly in order to have granite. That's the foundation stone around the world. Everything else is built on top of that. So in reality, when God said, let the dry land appear, it could not have taken millions and billions of years old. It had to literally be instant. He spoke it into existence. And that got a lot of people rattled up because like, whoa, how could that be? Yeah, they can't. Yeah. And if you notice, every creation scientist out there that makes new discoveries, they're all banned as scientists out of the scientific realm. So it's a true battle out there. So if we look at the creation timeline, we believe that somehow 6,000 years ago that there was Jesus, or God spoke the world into existence, and it was so. And so people look at us and they tell us, hey, because you believe that, it's a fairy tale. It's not scientific. Because we believe in the beginning, God, period. Now, the evolutionist timeline, if you look at it, they go 20 billion years ago, and there was a Big Bang, and the Big Bang produced this Earth, and the Earth was cooled off. So you can literally say the evolutionists, they're religious as well. We believe in the beginning God. They believe in the beginning dirt. So you tell me, who would you want to believe, or who sounds crazier? To believe in God or to believe in dirt? That we came from dirt, from nothing, from a bunch of, I don't know. I'll let you guys judge that one, okay? So the claim comes that, well, no, you can't look at the dirt. You got to look at the fossils in the dirt. Fossils prove evolution. Oh, this is such a good one here. You see it in all of their writings that somehow, hey, the fossil record produces some of the strongest evidence that the species evolved over time, this article says. First of all, it's very silly. There is no fossil record. You guys know that, right? There's no fossil record. I'll explain it a little bit, okay? All you know is that you found a bunch of buried stuff. It's not actual record, systematic record, okay? Look back into the fossil record. As many textbooks say, fossils only exist in the present time. It don't tell you anything about the past. We could put our interpretation on them. We could look at a fossil and say, oh, this happened or that happened, but we do not know. All we know is that you found a fossil in the dirt. That's all it tells you. And all you can tell scientifically, and it's 100% accurate, is the following statement, that fossil died. That's all you can tell us. No, honestly, that's all you can tell us about it. Okay, so they'll write different articles and they'll say, wow, look at this, I forget how to pronounce that fish. It was giving birth. And yeah, that was either a very, very, very slow birth or creation was destroyed by a flood and it was buried quickly. So it's our interpretation on the fossil. Okay? So which way do you want to look at it? Depends on you. Well, don't fossils take millions of years to develop? Thousands of years to get hard? No. Here's somebody that it's actually a petrified cowboy leg. He actually broke his leg in there. I don't even want to know what happened to the poor guy, but it fossilized his foot inside the boot. Okay, and you can get a bunch of information if you want on that one. Okay, here's a fossilized pickle. How many like pickles? Yeah, there's a good one there. Here's fossilized peanuts. For those peanut lovers. Now, if you're young and you like cuddly things, we got something for you as well. Here's a fossilized or petrified bear. Yeah, that'll be a nice collection, right? Give that to your kids. They'll love that. Petrified jellyfish. Now, you have to have very special conditions for that to happen, right? That have to be a very quick burial. And here's a petrified rope, okay? Now, all this can happen quickly. It doesn't take millions of years. All of this points to one certain evidence, and that is that there was a great flood that buried everything, and it got fossilized quickly. Now, yesterday, was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday, I was at Lake Whitney Ranch. How many have been to the ranch out there? Lake Whitney Ranch. Okay, it's a beautiful place. It's my first time going there. And that's one of the little branches that comes off, and on the left side is the conference property. It's real pretty. They took us on a little hike down there to show us. Have anybody been down there to see that? Okay, so one of you. And it's really cool. They got that ledge that extends way out, and it goes on way back there and whatnot. And the rancher there, his name is Javier. Javier comes and says, hey, guys, check this out. He didn't even know what he was doing. But, hey, check this out. Look at right here. And guess what he pointed to? Fossilized clams. Sea clams fossilized in the middle of Texas. What does that tell you? At one point, this was overflowed with flood. And the more I looked, the more I found these fossilized everywhere. They were all up on that wall that I showed you guys. Let me bring that back up to you. Right up the whole wall. I mean, that whole layer was thousands and thousands and thousands of seashells, all right there. And I thought, like, man, that didn't take millions of years. Now, here's another very interesting fact, okay? If you're trying to use fossils to prove evolution, it's actually a very, very silly argument. So if you find a fossil in the dirt, you don't know if it had any kids, let alone different kids. You get that, right? When you find a bone, you say, oh, here it is. It's a fossilized whatever. You can't look at it and say, oh, see, this one had kids and this one did not have kids. You can't tell. You can't grab that fossil and say as well, this one produced a different kind. That's not science. You're jumping out of the science realm and you're going over into the fantasy world thinking that bones can produce something that you did not see and you cannot test. It doesn't have an engravement there. I had 5 kids. It doesn't say made in China. It just doesn't. So you can't prove that fossils had anything else than its own kind, right? So why do evolutionists claim that the bones in the dirt can do something that the living animals cannot do? That is a question. How can they? Well, they just claim it, but just because you claim it doesn't mean it's true, right? Here's another one. Over millions of years, the Colorado River was carved, or it has carved out the Grand Canyon from solid rock. How many have heard that theory before too? Right? You go over there and everybody, the big plaques. We had the privilege of being over there this past summer, and it was pretty neat. All right. So what's wrong with the Colorado River? Here's what they're saying. It cut through the layers of rocks over millions of years. Okay. If you ever been over there to the Colorado, and maybe you have not noticed, but at the entrance of the river, where it enters into the Grand Canyon, it enters at an elevation of 2,800 feet. When it exits the canyon, it's 1,800 feet above sea level. So yes, it's going downhill, and that is perfectly fine. That's how rivers flow. How many could figure out that rivers only flow downhill? Yes, okay? There is a problem though. There's an area right here where you see the snow covered that is actually pretty high. It ranges from 6,900 to 8,500 feet above sea level, which tells us that there was something had to happen for about 270 miles where at one point long ago and far away, in order for that canyon to have been carved out, the river must have flowed uphill. Now, how many can believe that one? Let me put a sideways picture so you can understand what I'm trying to say. Colorado River enters, it cuts through the Grand Canyon at a really high elevation, and then it exits out on the other side. So at some point, that river had to go uphill to start carving that canyon. Now, could that happen? Scientifically, can it happen? Has anybody observed the rivers flowing uphill? No, they all go down here. That's actually a silly thing, right? So we know that at one point, we can speculate that that canyon was not formed over millions of years, but that there was actually a lake that had backed up. Maybe, most likely, right after the flood, water got trapped in there, a ton of water. And as the time passed, that water cut through the canyon or overflowed, and it made that big cut through the canyon, right? The top of the canyon there is higher than the bottom of it, because that's obvious. All right, we explained all that. Here's a good one in Creation magazine that they have actually looked at the possibilities of. And yes, there used to be a Grand Lake over there, and you have some aquatic fossils still found there. And also Hopi Lake, which no longer exists, but if those would have overflowed enough, you have that water gushing out and cutting through the Grand Canyon. Okay, so it didn't happen over millions of years. It could have happened very quickly. And we know that that's dumb. Sorry. So, do we have evidence of that? That canyons can happen quickly? Yes. Okay. The Berlin Game Canyon in Washington State was carved out in 6 days. That was a reservoir that was done up on top of a mountain or hill, high place, whatever you want to call it. And it rained too much and it got weak and it broke. And there's pictures of it, and that water just gushed out so fast. There's power in water, you know that. It will do some damage. And there's the pictures of it overflowing and just rushing down. Took everything in its sight out of it. Just went down, and it went so fast. All that water came down so fast, so hard, it formed a canyon that you could see down there. And you could actually walk down in the canyon, and to this day. They didn't fill it back up. I mean, that'd be absurd. But you have the different layers. Wow, just like the Grand Canyon, guys. It's showing you that this has the potential of creating canyons very quickly, and it didn't have to happen over millions of years. Now, let's move on to another subject real quick. How many know what picture this one is? It's called Spirit Lake. Happened over there in Mount St. Helen when it erupted. Washington State, right? Erupted, threw a ton of logs everywhere. Actually, the blast was so big, I mean, it tore down all the trees for a big area all around the mountain. It clogged up the dam, and they were harvesting so much wood out of Spirit Lake, and here's a picture of them trying to collect some of the wood and stuff and getting to it. It was incredible amount. Now, they couldn't get it all because it was just way too much. They didn't have use of it. So the logs just floated right there on Spirit Lake. It floated up on top, and after a while, what happens when the logs float? They get full of water and they sink down, right? You know that. And then when they sink down, they tend to sink not laying down, but kind of buoyant. And they go down, and there's some pictures of the logs as they get buried over time. Now, Scientists will tell you that everything is made in layers, but if you go down there at the bottom of Spirit Lake, you'll see that some of those are actually buried about 15 feet deep in sediment already. And if this is a copy of what could have potentially happened at the flood, you would expect to see this all over the world. And guess what you see all over the world? You see the layers, that's right. Some of you guys guessed it. You see the layers of these trees that they're not horizontal, but vertical, in a bunch of different layers all around them, all throughout the world, right? And then you have some of the layers that they're made up of dark bark and organic debris. And this goes perfectly well with the creation story, or actually the flood story. Now, if you go to some museums, they will tell you that each layer represents millions of years old. Okay? 70 million years, one era, right? They even have this geologic column, and depending on what you find in them, it's so many years old. That's not quite how it works, because you have these trees that will literally connect millions of years old. So how long did that tree take to get petrified? How did that happen? It totally goes against the evolution theory. And today you can go over to the petrified forest and you can still find some of these trees petrified sticking up out of the ground. How many have seen them? Yes, okay, some of you guys have been there. All right. This was another tree found that going through several layers, and they have so many all around the world that'll prove that the world did not take millions of years to evolve. You have the trees going perfectly through millions of years of supposed sediment, right? Everywhere. Here's a good one here. This is a 30-foot petrified tree, okay, all the way from the top to the bottom. Now, what does this prove? Well, it proves that there was a flood. It didn't take millions of years. And when you bury a bunch of stuff like that, some of those things, if you have the right conditions, the right pressure and everything, actually become coal. That's where we get our coal seams from. And our coals are seams, they're always horizontal, as you see in that demonstration, that picture. Okay? And if you go to the coal seams, which would make perfect sense, they have found some stuff in the coal seams that supposedly took billions of years to form with some sort of organic matter. And here's one that was found in 1944. Okay? It's a little bell, found it inside a clump of coal. How did that get there? Interestingly enough, it's got the little, I guess, pagan god that they used to worship back then. That's why it was destroyed, right? The flood. They found a lot of stuff, like a 4.5-inch zinc and silver vessel have been found there. This article here tells us that in June 11 that they were pulling up some coal, and out of curiosity, they actually found a gold chain about 10 inches in length. That would have been cool to find, right? Inside the coal. But how did it get there? Here's a cast iron pot that was found inside the coal as well. So no, coal did not happen billions and billions of years ago. It happened right after the flood. And we can actually go, this is another topic that we can go over a whole day talking about the things that have been found inside of coal being man-made. Okay? We're not going to go there. Let's move on. There's plenty of more to talk about. But, all right, back to the Pangea theory. Now, after the flood, there was ice. North Pole, South Pole, there was a bunch of ice. And so this is how we believe that the animals got around as well. There's what you call the, I forgot the name. Great. Not the trench, continental shelf. Thank you. Continental shelf. You see that all over the world. Now, if you were to drain the water back down a little bit, maybe about 60 feet in some places, from anywhere from 60 to 150 feet. Guess what you will find around the world? That every single continent is connected. Okay? Everywhere from Europe all the way around. It's even theorized right there, the Strait of, is that Gibraltar Strait, that maybe that was a place where the water came in at one point, and then later on, as it continued flooding, it came over to the other side. We're not sure. But there's one thing that we do know, that this continental shelf makes everything, puts everything together. You could travel literally around the world without having to sail anywhere. You would be on dry land. Now, interestingly enough, in the book of Genesis, it tells us that Arphaxad, memorize that name, look it up, in his days, the earth was divided. So it could have been that the polars were melting, ocean level rose, and divided everything. Very simple. Okay? And if you see how way long ago, right after the flood, the continental shelf was way out there, guess what has been found almost worldwide in those continental shelves? Cities. They've been found out there. Yes, they have been found a ton of different places. Like in Egypt, they've discovered 30 feet under the water, the Mediterranean Sea. Yes, we found cities down there, buried. And you can go around the world and you find in different places in Greece and stuff. We could spend all day talking about all the places that they have found in the oceans. Now, how hard is it to build a city in the ocean? It's really hard, right? Almost impossible. But we find it there. Why? Because the ocean used to be further back. And then it melted the ice and the water levels rose. So, if it took millions of years for land to settle down or the sediment to appear, you wouldn't also have the following, okay? How many have seen that the different layers of the earth, they're all crumpled up in different places? If it took millions of years, they would be flat. And let's say, well, no, it's because an earthquake happened and the earthquake buckled it up. But guess what? You do not see any cracks in there. It's solid. And you can go anywhere. You know, here they cut a road into the mountain. How is it all bent up like that? If it took millions of years. And if an earthquake did it, why don't we see more cracks everywhere? You can't get up there. You can't put your hand into any of that. It's solid. And you can see these formations of sediment all around the world. You can take a close look at them, and you can say, hey, truly, this was soft at one point. And it didn't take millions of years. It actually got crumpled up and it dried that way. Look at this everywhere. Well, Pastor Belew, hold on. Carbon dating is what tells us how old the earth is. How many have heard that one before? Yes, carbon dating. We could talk all about why carbon dating is a false way of dating the world, okay? But, okay, so just to give you a few examples on why carbon dating doesn't work, they have actually tested, they carbon dated the lower leg of a mammoth, okay? 15,380 years ago, or RC radiocarbon dating years, while its skin dated 21,000. So the same mammoth had two different readings of about 5,000. That's almost a 20%, 25% error there. That's a lot. That was carbon dating in 1949. Okay, 1949. Keep that in your mind. All right. They've also come up with the living mollusk shells were carbon dated to be 2,300 years old. That's an old mollusk shell. Or carbon dating doesn't work. Now check out the date on that one. 1963. It's still not working. It's still not working at all. All right. All right, if a C14 date supports our theories, this is what they say, the scientists. We'll put it in the main text. If it does not entirely contradict them, then we'll put it on the footnote. And if it does not, if it is completely out of date, we just drop it. In other words, that's selective using of dates to try to push an agenda. That's what indoctrination looks like right there. That's in 1970. It's still not working. Okay? So they carbon dated a freshly killed seal, and it carbon dated, or the year came up, was 1,300 years ago. That's in 1971. It's still not working. So what does that tell you about carbon dating? It just doesn't work. Okay? You can't use that. One part of this baby frozen mammoth dated 40,000 years ago, and another one 26,000 years ago. All right? So, and right around it, 9,000 to 10,000 years. I mean, it's completely crazy. Here's a living shell dated 27,000 years old, and that was in 1984. It still does not work even through today. Here's another mammoth that was carbon dated, 29,000 years old, and another part of it, 44,000 years old. It doesn't work. Carbon dating don't work, period. Okay? So how can we tell different things that will show us that literally the world is not 6,000 or millions of years old? Well, we had to grab the oldest thing that we can look at, and we base ourselves off of that. And there's several indicators about that. And we're just going to go with one because we're talking about Earth. Okay? And that is the Sahara Desert. Okay? The Sahara Desert has a prevailing wind pattern. How many have seen that? You get all this dust that comes off, goes into the ocean. This hot air that blows across the Sahara Desert is basically what brings in our hurricanes all the way across to us, and we get to reap the benefits of the prevailing wind pattern in Africa. Well, there's a process that happens when you have this, and it's called desertification. That's where the desert literally grows because the hot air is blowing, drying it up. It doesn't rain, and the desert is literally growing. And they have been measuring the growth of the Sahara Desert. They have literally done scientific studies on it to see how fast that desert has grown. Okay, and this is what they came up with. In the past, it's so many miles wide. It used to be X amount of miles difference in the past. It is growing. And now they can actually measure in the future how much bigger it's going to get. Well, if you were to reverse that pattern by year, roughly of how fast it's growing, guess how old that puts the Sahara Desert? Roughly about 4,000 years old. Well, what happened around 4,400 years ago? The Great Flood. Great Flood happened, and all of a sudden, you read in the Bible that that God brought a wind, and He dried up the land, and that wind hasn't stopped, guys. It's still out there working, doing its deal, right? So why do people, and we'll wrap it up with this, why do people insist so much to get rid of a God? And they tell us, there's some of our leading evolutionists, and they come up to this and they say it out loud. It's nothing that they hide. They say, I suppose the reason why we leap at the origin of species was that the idea of God interfered with our sexual mores. In other words, they loved the sin. And that's why God was not an option for them. They want to continue sinning. So the evolution theory is based not on science. If we take a close look at the world, it tells us there is a God. That's why nature is God's second Bible. It teaches us. And I love it when we get to the house sometimes and Let's watch something. And I put on something in nature. And my kids, not nature again. Yes, nature. I love it, you know. Oh, the Bible tells us this. And this is the condemnation, that the light is come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. With so much evidence, and we're barely scratching the surface, guys. I'm running through these slides. I'm running through, there could be so much more presented that point to us that this world is not millions and billions of years old. It has a date roughly about 6,000 years ago. There was a creation. There's so much evidence of a flood 4,400 years ago, just like the Bible teaches. So in reality, the only evolution that should happen as we gaze to the world and we see that, wow, God is real, is one evolution. And that is to come to the cross and let God transform us. That's the only one. That's the only thing that can save us from this world. Those that don't want to go through this process are literally trying to find anything, any excuse in order for us not to have to deal with God. Do away with the flood. They don't like the flood story. Flood story talks about judgment. They don't want God judging them. They don't want God telling them what to do. God says in His Word that there's a coming judgment. And it's actually coming very soon, guys. The coming judgment is about to come. And there's a world that's not ready. There's a world that doesn't even want to acknowledge that God exists because they don't want to see a judgment. They don't want to change. Now, let me ask you this. How many of you guys love change? Nobody likes change. Change is hard. We get accustomed to doing one thing. Let me ask the couples here. Do you have your favorite side of the bed? And if you were to sleep on the other side of the bed, what happens? This is my side, right? Dinner table. Do you have your place where you sit? This is my spot, right? Yeah. This is my side of the closet. How many know what I'm talking about? Here's wife's side of the closet, men's side of the closet, right? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. We're creatures of habit. We don't like change, but we need change. We need change. Yeah, we need to change our heart. Why? Because Jesus loved us so much. He was willing to die for us just so that He can have us back in heaven with Him. So let's give our hearts to Jesus. Let's love Him back. There's nothing else to do, guys. He's, I love the verse in Revelation chapter 21. 21 and 22, one of those. He says, and I, John, saw a new heaven and a new earth, where the former things were passed away. God is going to recreate a new heaven and a new earth, and we're going to watch it. That's going to be awesome. Today, if you haven't given your life to Jesus, give it to Him. Just submit completely. Say, Lord, I know I need change. I know I do as a pastor. I need change. And if I was to ask for somebody to testify about that, my wife would be the first one to stand up. Oh, yeah, Pastor Belew, he needs to change. She loves me the way I am, though. Right, babe? Put you on the spot here. Sometimes, right? Most times, right? Most times. But as we come to Jesus tonight, let's recognize Him for who He is. He is the Creator. And He's coming back. He's going to recreate a new heaven and a new earth. But guess what? We have the privilege of not having to wait for a new heavens and new earth in order to be recreated. We can be recreated tonight. The same God that spoke worlds into existence can speak a new heart and a new mind into us tonight. All we have to do is give Him permission to do it. So I invite you tonight, as we wrap this up, as we pray, I invite you to stand with me and give your hearts to Jesus tonight, to recreate us into a new person. Father in heaven, we want to thank you for everything you have done for us, for having created such a perfect world. Father, I know that we messed up and sin has literally destroyed that ancient world, and we're still suffering through today. But Father, we wait patiently and we look forward to having a new heavens and a new earth, and where we'll watch you speak it all into existence again. What an awesome day that will be. But Father, for us to participate of that day, we need to let you in our lives tonight. So Father, I pray in the name of Jesus, we give you permission to enter in and recreate in us a new heart and a new mind. Father, you are our creator. We acknowledge you. We ask that you please wrap your arms of love around us tonight and forevermore. Is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord be with you. Next week, we're going to start looking at the fish and the birds. It's going to get good.